Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to part one of the PennSave 201 webinar conference series. I'm Rob Altenberg, and along with my co-host Marilyn Begal, we'll be presenting a nuts and bolts review of the performance contracting process. This first session will concentrate on determining if performance contracting is the right choice for you. PennSave is a joint project of the Penn Future Energy Center, the Energy Services Coalition, and the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership. PennSave is not an energy services company. Our goal is to promote energy efficiency by educating consumers about performance contracting. As a brief introduction, again, my name is Rob Altenberg, and I'm a senior energy analyst with the Penn Future Energy Center. I came to the PennSave program recently after almost 22 years working at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And I'll hand it over to Marilyn to briefly introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Begal. I am owner of Be Green Consulting, and I have contracted with PennSave to help develop this program. I was formerly working with the Energy Office at the Department of General Services at the state, and after I retired, I just continued on working with energy management.
Okay, well, before we begin, there's a couple administrative details to cover. This is part one of a four-part series on performance contracting. We're producing this for two audiences. The first is our live web audience listening right now, and the second includes those watching the recording once this is posted online. Our live audience can ask questions using the chat box to the right of the screen, and we'll answer as many questions as time permits, although if there are complicated questions or case-specific issues, we might defer those answers until we can provide a written answer. Those watching this as a recording can send their questions to info@pennsave.org, and we'll again try to address all of those questions that we can. Just to briefly review our curriculum, for those not familiar with performance contracting, PennSave provides the PennSave 101 program, and that's a short 45-minute overview of the process and procedures. This is the 201 level, which is a more detailed discussion for those preparing to begin a project. And we also have the 301 level materials that there's existing materials out there and being developed, and these are more targeted at those involved in a specific project or further along the way. Moving into the material here, a good starting place for those interested in performance contracting is the Good Candidate forms available at PennSave.org. Like much of our curriculum, these forms come in three different levels of detail. If you're familiar with the 101 level form, it asks some very basic questions to identify your need, to understand the decision-making process, and determine if the energy consumption at your location or facility is high enough to make a project cost-effective. Now, this is typically an annual utility spend of around $250,000, but the exact figure really depends on the project and the energy services company involved in what's needed. This 201 level form asks more detail to help you identify the possible scope of a project. This information is not only helpful to the ESCOs in developing a cost-effective proposal, but it's also useful for the decision makers of your facility. A successful project, again, we talk about the parties to involve, a successful project will want to involve all of the decision makers and the key staff early in the process. And this would include facilities management, those who will be involved in contract negotiations, those involved in the final execution of the project's contract, and also those involved in other critical details such as review of the project invoices and ensuring that the bills get paid on time. Rather than read from the slide, I can bring up here a copy of the actual form. Let me to bring up the copy of the Good Candidate form itself. These are again available on the PennSave.org website. This information, again, is good for the client's planning, but it's also something that you'd want to send along with an RFP or an RFQ, and it would be very useful to the ESCOs in determining what the potential is there for a project, for ESCOs deciding whether they want to go through the initial qualification process or submit a bid. As you can see, the general facility data is asking basic who, what, and where questions. And like many of the PennSave forms, again, this is just a template. Well, this is enough information to get started. You can certainly add other key information. You can certainly list other people who will need to be involved, contacts for technical or administrative issues. And in fact, this is, while working through the form, it's a good time to really start thinking about those other people that need to be involved. Scroll down to...
Your form's not showing up, Rob.
Let me look in... Let me scroll down here. Is anybody else not seeing the form? Is anybody seeing the form? If they can mark in the chat box. Do you still not see the form, Marilyn?
No.
Let me try again.
There it is.
Okay, we see the form now. Okay. See the form now. Okay, thank you very much. The going down to the, I guess, operating data. The operating data, again, this is fairly basic information about the hours of operation and seasonal information that's going to be helpful in selecting the most cost-effective projects. The type of HVAC control system, again, also important. Certainly modern digital control systems that can be programmed and customized for specific uses are going to be more efficient than older analog systems. Similarly with the energy management system, which may not only be controlling key equipment such as HVAC and lighting, but it could also provide reporting information and diagnostic information that would also be useful when developing a project. Section 3 of the form also asks for square footage of space. This is a factor in calculations involving lighting, insulation, and ventilation, so it's another important factor. It's another important factor to be added to the form. Section 5, we get into the energy systems, and this starts off asking about fuels used. Of course, specific fuels are going to make a big difference in cost calculations. But also the local utilities may also have various rebate programs to encourage efficiency, and that can be fuel specific too. So that is definitely something that we want to identify up front. The lighting upgrade question is another important question, like we're seeing in the retail market where 60-watt incandescent bulbs were replaced by 13-watt compact fluorescent bulbs a few years ago, and now these are being replaced by sometimes 7-watt LEDs or below. The same thing is happening in the non-residential market where there's many new options to replace the older tubes. Well, the older tubes replaced by the T8 tubes, and those are being replaced now. There's other options to replace those tubes, and there's also options for replacement of the mercury vapor and sodium lights. The last set of questions about opportunities under Section 5 really has two functions. Because of the nature of the performance contracting, it'll probably make sense to address all of the practical cost-effective upgrades as part of the final project. That's going to reduce the payback period overall, and having more and newer equipment can often reduce or defer maintenance costs. The previous analysis the question regarding the previous analysis, analyses done by organizations like DEP, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, information from those analyses are going to help to ensure that all or most of the cost-effective measures are being considered and any issues that come up will be addressed. Now, there are cases where there's needed repairs or upgrades that might not be cost effective on their own, and sometimes it is possible to take these and combine them with the project, so all or at least part of that cost could be offset by the energy improvements. Ideally, if you have a project that's in its entirety cost effective, you can support some needed upgrades that aren't necessarily cost effective on their own. And now I'll hand this over to Marilyn, and I'll bring up the slide so she can talk about the facilitators. And I believe the new slide is up there. There you go, Marilyn.
All right, thank you. One of the questions that you might want to ask when determining whether you would benefit from a project is the availability of consultants, or we would call them third-party facilitators, that would be assisting a client through all steps of your project. The reasons you might want to look at this is your staff or you don't have time, or you have a lack of staff and a lack of resources, a lack of technical expertise, and a facilitator would provide that expertise for your project. Facilitators may be hired for an entire project or to assist the client through selected steps of the process. This is process one and step one in the process, and I think that this is the time to consider. I don't know if you necessarily would have to have a facilitator involved right at this step, but it is a thing to consider because facilitators for these projects are extremely capable in organizing a project, and getting you started is, you know, with anything else, once you get started, it goes a lot smoother. Okay, Rob, I'm going to go to the next slide. One of the things to consider about a facilitator is hiring. Most parties may have to do an RFP to hire a facilitator. There are facilitators available. We are working up a list and soliciting facilitators to put their names and contact information on the PennSave website, that they would be available for you. But in the meantime, you need to think about what you want your facilitator to do. Their qualifications should be administrative, of course, the knowledge of the process. You want ability to train your staff. You want the facilitator to have a knowledge of documents and contract negotiation skills. If you would like a facilitator to help you through evaluating proposals, you need someone who has the ability to do that, plus the understanding of standard ECMs. And the most important, I think, is understanding your facility operations and what would be needed for your facility. Also, of course, the most important part is your financial, a knowledge of funding models and third-party lenders, and what's available out there to fund these projects. The majority of your facilitators will have that information, and should have it, to help you through that process. Okay, Rob. Okay. Facilitator payments. Paying a facilitator can vary. Also, pricing will vary amongst facilitators. Some facilitators will charge a project percentage rate. It's usually 2.5 to 5%. Some go higher, depending on the cost of the project. This is if you're going to have a facilitator do your entire project or do it for you, I would think you would be charged a percentage of the project rate. There's also a flat rate per project. Some facilitators are out there and say, I will charge this amount of money to do a project. And then there's also an hourly rate with estimated hours. Most facilitators would go through the process, estimate the hours it would take for them to help you complete each step, and then put a cost for that hour. Any administrative hours will run less than technical hours spent. So there's a variety out there, and sometimes you can just hire or negotiate to fit your project. If you want to go through a process, the process list and say, you know, I can do this, I have staff to do this, but I'm going to be stuck in this part, you can hire a facilitator just to do a step or a section of your project that you don't have time to do, or you don't have the expertise to do. Paying a facilitator, there are a lot of payment options. You can pay your facilitator right out of your budget. Negotiate, this is what's going to cost, and pay that facilitator at milestones of the project. Facilitator payments can be added to the cost of the project. This needs to be negotiated with the service provider, the ESCO, that you have chosen, and it needs to go into the total cost of your project. This is really something to consider. It's a benefit, but you need to make sure that negotiations are made with the ESCO, that payment is made to you to pay that facilitator. But remember, if you hire a facilitator to organize your project and do all the upfront administrative work with RFPs, RFQs, investment grade audit contracts, and you don't go through with the project, you will owe that facilitator for the time spent up until that point. It's just like the investment grade audit. If you go through the investment grade audit and then decide after the investment grade audit that you're not going through with the project, then you owe the ESCO the cost of the investment grade audit. The same with the facilitator. If they have worked up until, excuse me, that you're going to sign the contract and you don't go through with that contract, you will owe that facilitator 4 hours spent up to that point. Okay, Rob. Along with planning or questioning if you should hire a facilitator, you need to start looking at some resources. What's available out there? Do I have enough resources that I don't need a facilitator? And this could be for you because there is a lot of information out there for you. One of them is the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP Energy Office. They have some programs and they have a lot of information. The Keystone they have the Keystone Energy Education Program. They call it KEEP, and it's teaching about energy efficiency in school buildings. They also will give a free Energy Star portfolio manager for school building staff, your administrators, your facilities managers. You can get all that information at keep at energyworkshops.org. They are having workshops. I think there's one coming up in May, and I think that from what I have seen, I think this would be these are excellent workshops to attend. They give you a lot of information. And one of the things that they start with, and this is something you might want to think about, if you know what you're spending and you know it's a whole lot easier to measure, and you can't save what you don't know you're doing. So this is a lot of good information. They also have an energy management for schools pilot program in the South Central region, in the management region for South Central. This is looks to me like it's going to be a great program. They're going to provide assessments for schools. Now, this is your previous analysis that we were talking about. If they assess your schools, you've got a lot of information to help you make that decision about a project. They will share school best practices, and then they will promote the schools with effective energy management programs. You can get all that information from Mark Hand at mhand@pa.gov. He is the South Central Region Energy Management Manager for DEP. Okay, Rod, there's the next slide. Other resources available to help you make your decisions are your utility companies. The utility data that you're going to need if you're going to go through with a project will give you your utility spend. Your utility company can help you with collecting your bills or giving you information about what you're going to need. They also have rebate and efficiency programs. There are a lot of rebate programs out there for each of the utility companies. The PJM, the grid has a lot of programs. This is another factor in your decision because there's money available and it can help fund your project. Also, as part of our PennSave program, the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership, the Local Development District Network, the LDDs that are in 7 regions across the state, they do have resources for energy education. They give training and technical assistance, and they help reduce energy costs and consumption through energy efficiency project implementation. They will help you. They can give you a lot of information. And of course, the website there is paenergypartnership.psu.edu. And you can find out all the information about what LDD is in your region through that website. Then again, you have our PennSave resources. At the PennSave.org website, you have project processes. You have sample documents. You have sample timelines for projects and a lot of educational materials. Plus, if you have any questions, you can email info@pennsave.org, and someone will answer your questions. If we need to research, we will. But we have, it's been a very successful Q&A avenue for people who are doing projects. Also, what I don't have on here was the Energy Services Coalition. It's a national program. There is a Pennsylvania chapter, but that website is energyservicescoalition.com. So I think that there's information out there that can help you decide. One of the things that we've wanted to do at PennSave is say, one of the things that's on the website is roles and responsibilities, which can also help you decide, because we have the roles and responsibilities of the customer and we have the roles and responsibility of your service provider. You can go through that list and know, if I'm going to do this project, here are my responsibilities. And I think that also helps you decide if you think you can meet all those responsibilities and say, all right, this may be a good thing for me. So a lot of information out there. You have a lot of resources. All right, is there any questions now so far?
Yeah, we have two questions online, Marilyn. The first one is asking whether third-party facilitators are available through the PennSave program.
They are not yet. We will eventually have a list of third-party facilitators on the website that you could solicit or choose from. But now, do I know a lot of them? Yes, but we would like to just have a list up there, like we would have a list of service providers that you could send an RFP to or that you could contact. But right now we don't have them, other than your LDDs that may help you organize, or any questions we may answer in PennSave. But to hire a facilitator through PennSave, it would just be a list available for you.
Our next question is, I'll read it off here. In the past, facilitators were generally project managers assigned by the ESCO. Is this no longer allowed? You're already paying for this in their IGAs.
This facilitator, what we're talking about here are facilitators that work for the customer. They're not the ESCO's client. They are your client. They will work for the customer. They are there to help the customer through the project. The ESCOs will hire a project manager to go through, but I've never known them to hire a facilitator that would work for the client.
Our next question, Marilyn, is what is the most common way of compensating a third-party facilitator?
The most common way that I have seen is paying for that facilitator out of your budget. It's the easiest way. It also helps you decide what you want to hire the facilitator for. If you're going to hire a facilitator to do a whole project, that costs maybe 5% of your project. You want to take a look at, I think, to best fit your needs, what you need, absolutely need that facilitator to do for you. Because there are some things that you're going to be able to do. It's your project. That's the good news. The bad news is it's your project. Sometimes you just don't have the staff to do it. So you could go through a process on our website, look at the processes, and say, you know, I can do this part, or I can do that part, but I'm going to need somebody to help me to evaluate the proposals. That's one of the biggest things is evaluation, and you may just hire a facilitator to help you evaluate. So there are many different ways, but paying for that out of your budget is the easiest way. Like I said before, paying for it as part of the project needs to be negotiated.
Okay, our next question up says, are the sample documents and timelines and other education materials on your website available to ESPCs involved in renewable energy projects, i.e. solar PV?
Project documents are on the website. Procurement documents, contracts, and so forth. And if what you're talking about is solar and ECMs through, there are no PPA documents, if that's what you're asking. But there are procurement documents and contracts as samples. Your processes are your procurement processes and what you need to do to go through an investment grade audit and construction and measurement and verification. So if part of that is renewable, and it's involved in your project, you would have those documents, but other than that, just alone renewable documents, no, there's not.
Okay, those are all the questions I have on my list here. I guess we can wait a second to see if another question shows up. If not, there's certainly, again, questions can be emailed to info@pennsave.org, and we'll try to answer these. We'll try to answer those questions. Next steps, again, this is the first part of a 4-part webinar series. Our next one will be held a week from today. I say that says PM on the slide. We're not holding it at 11 p.m. I'll have to go back and edit our slide. It's May 1st at 11 o'clock in the morning, same time as this conference was. Anybody interested in doing a bit of a review, this would probably be a good time to go over and at least make an attempt at completing the 201 form for the project you have in mind. Certainly we'll be able to answer any questions either through info@pennsave.org, or if you have questions on completing the 201 form process, you can certainly ask them during next week's webinar session. We'd like to thank everyone for attending this webinar session. And thank everyone again for attending, and we hope to see everyone again next week. Thank you very much.